Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So continuing after quite a good sort of break in our program Sirah and changing the format a bit. Previously we had the presentation and we had the projector, and it took a lot of extra time and a lot of extra energy. So unfortunately, although I like for everyone to see what we're talking about, however, it's caused a lot of complications. So today we're going to continue, and we were talking about the early Meccan period, and among the salient features of the early Meccan period was in the beginning of the invitation. Of course, it's a new religion, it's a new dawat, and Quraysh is one big family, extended family, you could say, even though there was various tribes, but actually they were all known as Quraysh, and they were all originally, their forefather was Quraysh, and then the lineage went down, and they broke up into sub-tribes. So now, as Rasulullah, as we heard previously, he's inviting to Islam, and in the early days, there were mostly the downtrodden, the poor, the oppressed. They were the ones who were more inclined towards entering into Islam, which is generally the trend even here or anywhere in the world. We find that the downtrodden, the oppressed, the people who feel a faqr, they feel a need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the Creator. Otherwise, people who have all the wherewithal and all the physical resources, they tend not to feel that need. However, it doesn't say that some of the nobles of Quraysh accepted Islam. As we mentioned, there were, of course, many of them as well who accepted Islam. Now what happened was, and we want to focus on this tonight, what took place was, as people are accepting Islam and leaving the system of the ancestral system and belief set, so this is causing a lot of friction. And not only causes friction in the side between the believers and the non-believers, but between family members. Sometimes it even takes place, the parents accept Islam, the children don't, or vice versa, and so forth, or the brother accepts, the sister doesn't, and so on. And so we see this clash, and this is significant to reflect on. Number one, for those people who have accepted Islam, like we who accepted Islam here in America or any other place. So here in America, we also see similar trends. Somebody accepts Islam, their brother doesn't, or their father doesn't. We had one woman who her son accepted Islam, her two sons accepted Islam, her daughter accepted Islam. She accepted Islam, of course, but her husband didn't accept Islam. And so, as a result of that, and actually, I was the one who introduced them, and this was in Washington D.C. in 1973, and she accepted Islam along with her children, but the husband didn't accept Islam. And this was, you can imagine, they had with the grown children how long they've been married, and so what took place was that we didn't mention to her that if he doesn't accept Islam, then Islam doesn't accept the woman to be a Muslim and the husband a non-Muslim. However, she came to hear about that. Somebody told her that, well, your husband hasn't accepted Islam, so you're no longer married. So she went directly to her husband and said, either you accept Islam or that's the end. Can you imagine that, a marriage of 20, 30 years, and then because of Islam, because of Iman, it's either or. And this woman, mashallah, amazing story, that would take up the whole time. But so this is a continuous process, and as people accept Islam, this is what happens. Now also, the people who were born in Muslim families, we find this kind of situation. Not that they are not all claiming to be Muslims, but the practice of Islam. We have a family who's not practicing Islam, and then somebody accepts, to follow, in total, and it brings a rift and a problem, And so this is a reoccurring thing. And then those of us who perhaps were born into Muslim families, and it was all, pretty smooth sailing from the beginning onwards, because we had the support of parents and brothers and sisters. So just feel how grateful that you must be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having that support. Whereas you can see here that these early Muslims and people who accept Islam, they don't have that facility, and they have to bear with severe hardship. Now we look at the direct family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his own uncle Abu Talib, who is fully supportive of him. Although he doesn't accept Islam, but he's supporting his nephew. Now, his brother Abu Lahab is in direct opposition. He and his wife Jamil, and for them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed as we heard earlier, he revealed the Surah Tabbat Yada Abi Lahab. And Nabi had invited all of the Quraysh in the very beginning of the Dawat and informed them, that what would you say if I were to tell you that there's an enemy which is about to attack you on the other side of this mountain, would you believe me? He said, we never heard you telling a lie. He said, well, I am here to warn you of a severe punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And his uncle Abu Lahab, Tabban laka sa'ir al-yawm, alihada jama'atana. Said, may you be destroyed. You put us through the trouble of all gathering over here just to tell us this? And he was really upset. And his wife was also, Jamil, was also a very great adversary of Islam. And ultimately, he was done away with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of him, and the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala follows him. So we had even the uncles of Rasulullah, a supporter, and we had a vehement enemy. And then Abu Talib, out of his four sons, two of the sons, Ja'far and Ali radiallahu anhuma, accepted Islam. And the other two brothers, Talib and Aqil, didn't accept Islam. So you have the uncle, in one way, not accepting, not rejecting, but supportive. And then his uncle, totally in adversity. And then two sons accepting Islam, two sons not accepting Islam. Allahu Akbar. And so just imagine, if you were faced with that situation, how would it be? And then Abu Lahab and Jamil, their two sons, were married to the two daughters of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ruqayya and Kulthum. And so they told her either they were actually had married or they were engaged. Two riwayats are there. In any case, they said, no, nothing doing. We're not having the daughters. We're not having our sons married to the daughters of Muhammad, who is, after all, that's his nephew. Nothing doing. So they divorced him. That's a very huge trauma you can imagine for these girls. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala arranged that Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala, who from another tribe also marries Ruqayya, and it was a very joyous occasion for Rasulullah and his wife Khadija radiallahu anha. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy came to the rescue, and then ultimately she dies, and he marries the second daughter, Kulthum, and therefore he's called the Nurain, the one of two lights, because he was married to both daughters of Rasulullah. And then you had also the aunts of Rasulullah, among them his aunt Urwa, and her son Tulayb, who accepts Islam and comes back and tells his mother, who was the aunt of Rasulullah, such and such happened. So his aunt said, well, if we were men, then we would, come to the assistance. He said, well, why don't you, come to the assistance and actually hear what he has to say. So the son was the means of bringing his mother, who was the aunt of Rasulullah, to the presence of Rasulullah, and of course he gives out, and she also accepts Islam. Allahu Akbar. And then we have Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha also. Among her family, there were pros and there were cons. There were people who had accepted, and there were people who were the bitter enemies. So Nawfal ibn Khuwaylid, who is Khadija's brother and is the staunch enemy, and he's also killed in Badr ultimately. So his son Asad accepts Islam. The father is a staunch enemy, and the son accepts Islam. So how would it be if your father was, forcing you not to go to the masjid? Why are you offering salat? Why are you fasting? Don't do this. Don't follow Islam. And then you want to follow it. Imagine the difficulties. Imagine the sacrifices that they had to, undergo. and Sayyidah Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha. She had accepted Islam. However, her husband, Abu al-As, had not accepted Islam, but he was not opposed and he was supportive. However, his family said, how do you dare remain in the marriage, in wedlock, with the daughter of Muhammad? Divorce her. He had nothing doing. Even though he hasn't accepted Islam, but they were deeply in love and they had deep affection for one another, and he was a person of honor. And ultimately, he did accept Islam. And Nabi ﷺ praised him that he was one who kept his word. In fact, he even agreed to send Zainab radiallahu anha to Medina at the time of Hijrah later on. However, he had not accepted Islam at that time. However, he still was a person of nobility. However, his people were forcing him, and they said, look, you've divorced this daughter of Muhammad, and we will, in lieu of that, we will produce for you the most noble, the most beautiful, the richest girl of Makkah, whoever you want, but just get rid of the daughter of Muhammad. So under such duress and under such difficulty, the early Muslims had to, proceed. Allahu Akbar. And then you have Hakim ibn Hizam ibn Khuwaylid, who is the cousin, or I should say the nephew of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu ta'ala. And he is the one, if you remember, we mentioned he is the one who gifted Zayd. Zayd, Sayyidah Khadija, who subsequently gifted him to Rasulullah who emancipated him later on. And so Hakim also, he's a staunch enemy, right? And however, his brother Khalid enters into Islam. So the two brothers, one is a staunch enemy and one has entered into Islam. And then, of course, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And I wanted to mention, we'll take a little bit extra time with your indulgence, because we have amazing history of the family of Abu Bakr and those related to him. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, of course, as you know, is the first of the grown men to actually accept Islam. And his original wife was Qutaydah bint Abdul Uzza. And from that marriage were his two children, Asma, and also his son Abdullah, who also accepted Islam early on. Now, somewhere along the line, they divorced for whatever reason, Allah knows best. In any case, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala thereafter married Roman, who is the father of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala. So Asma has a different mother and Aisha has a different mother. Also, the brother of Aisha, the older brother of Aisha, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, was the eldest son from Roman. Now, among them also, Abdullah had accepted Islam, Asma has accepted Islam, of course Aisha had accepted Islam. But Abdurrahman didn't accept Islam. So that is the eldest son, and he's opposed to his father, and he's opposed to his sisters. Allahu Akbar. And in fact, he didn't accept Islam until later on, in the truce of Hudaybiyah. After Hudaybiyah, he actually accepted Islam. So in the Battle of Badr, very interestingly, he told his father, he said, my father, in the Battle of Badr, I had the opportunity to kill you. You see? And they were opposed. So father was, and this happened, in the Battle of Badr, it was very prolific. The two sides of families would be a brother against a brother, or a father against a son, son against a father. And they were in battle, now with swords drawn. And so Abdurrahman tells his father that I had the opportunity, that, and I saw you and I could have easily killed, but of course you're my father, and so obviously I didn't, take any movement for that. Abu Bakr replied, he said, well, had I been given that opportunity to kill you, being that you were opposed to Islam and you were the enemy, I would have not hesitated to do so. Not because he didn't love his son, but because the love of Allah and His Rasul and the Deen was foremost. Can you imagine that? Your son, you meet your son in a battle and you'd be prepared to take his life. This was the iman of those people. It's unbelievable. Allahu Akbar. Now, another interesting event regarding Qutayla, the first wife of Abu Bakr, who had subsequently they had divorced. However, after Hijrah, and Qutayla is the mother of Asma bint Abi Bakr. So she comes to Medina, And the daughter is not prepared to greet her and give her sort of the customary welcome, and because she's not a Muslim. And in fact, her mother brings gifts, and so she's reluctant to accept them. And she doesn't until she goes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and says, Ya Rasulullah, my mother came and she's she came raghiba, meaning that she's, she's interested, in being kind to me and showing her kindness and motherly love to me. And so how do I respond to this? So Rasulullah in the Deen of Islam didn't come to break family ties, it came to further family ties. So Nabi Sallallahu said, by all means, accept her gifts, accept her hospitality. She's your mother, and be kind to her. And therefore, even Quran was revealed in this regard, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forbid you from showing kindness to those who have not opposed you. In so many words, the summary of those ayats. But rather those who are opposed to you, as we read early in this morning in the tafsir, those who are, they're showing hostility towards you, that's a different story. Otherwise, and we who have accepted Islam, we find our family members, our own parents, our own sisters, so we're to be kind to them and accept their kindness. But we don't take our close and confidential friends and allies other than Muslims from our own people. But we show them the affection, and we are very concerned that they should accept Islam. So therefore, of course, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told her, yes, accept her hospitality, and you show a daughterly hospitality to your mother. And we have so many other instances, and I know that you've all, I don't want to, people are getting a little bit nervous, they would like to get back home. So, inshallah, we'll continue this, inshallah, on the next, there's a lot of very interesting seerah regarding these individuals, which is a great ibrat for us, inshallah. We'll continue this, inshallah, next week with Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to really appreciate our ancestors in Islam, the sacrifices that they gave for the deen, and at the same time appreciate the ease and comfort and the sahulat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Otherwise, had we been placed in such circumstances, how would we have responded? Would we have been able to withstand that kind of onslaught of trials and tribulations? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to, appreciate them, and at the same time keep us in afiyat, and not to give us a burden beyond our bearance levels. Ameen thumma ameen. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.